and eventually not, they won't be able to match up with it when they get into the role, because DevOps role is very, very demanding. It's a very, very demanding role. You can, I mean, when we get to the day in the life of a DevOps engineer, I will speak about my own experience in my current job role, in my current organization where uh, where I'm a platform engineer. I will tell you how it is. So it's a very, very hectic role. So you need to take out your time to learn. And once you get to a job, you will keep on learning, but you need to always get the basics before getting into that job. I mean, there are some jobs that will be patient enough to train you. If you get that, lucky enough for you. So yeah, killer applications. The CV must reflect the skill set you are good at. Then moving forward, standing out in DevOps. So again, there's this particular saying that there's this particular saying, I don't know, I think it was Dr. Miles Morrow that said it some time ago, that what we all have the same time, and we all have opportunity to do the same thing in, what's it called, in 8 hours or 9 hours. Probably your work is 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever they call it. Is it 9 to 5 or 8 to 5? You have several DevOps engineers that work from 8 to 5. There is definitely one that will be better than others or more proficient technically than others. And that difference is not in the utilization, it's not in just the time that's available to all of them. I mean, it's also part of the time management. But that's what the distinguishing factor is what you use your extra time for. What do you do after 5? How do you put in more effort to get better at what you do? That is where the defining factor is. However, in trying to learn the DevOps role, how do you stand out? First of all, you need to highlight major tools. I mean, you need to be good with Git. I mean, Git is not so difficult. It's pretty much very, very easy. You need to highlight CI/CD tools. You have Jenkins, you have Bitbucket pipelines, you have GitHub Actions, you have Circle CI. There are so many. So what you need is always the basics, because when you get to an organization today, they will tell you that we don't use Jenkins here, or we don't use Bitbucket pipeline here. We use Jenkins, or we use GitHub Actions here. How do you translate the events or the code logic or the pipeline scripts that you use in Bitbucket pipelines or using Jenkins? How do you replicate that in a GitHub Actions environment? It all boils down to your understanding of the basics. It's very easy. I mean, from my own experience, is very straightforward and easy. But again, that is where the basics is very important. Then quantify impact. So let's say you already are in the DevOps role, or you're probably interning at an organization, you're moving to another one. You always need to talk about what you did and where you were previously as an intern or as a full-time staff. I was able to reduce deployment lead time by 40%. Let's say when you came in, they used to deploy in like the time between code commit and production before that application gets to production is probably used to be 7 days. Then when you came in, you reduce it from 7 days to 4 days or 3 days. That's you quantifying an impact that you made. And how do you do that? That will lead to more conversations as to how you reduce the deployment lead time. How do you reduce it from 3 to 5 days? So that makes you stand out from others. And also, there are certain DevOps metrics you need to understand when you are looking for DevOps roles. As if you are moving, like you're moving from full-time to full-time, you have certain DevOps metrics. We normally call them DORA metrics, DORA, like DORA as in Dora. That's what we normally call them. But I mean, I don't think that we need that for now. So, but I mean, it's DORA metrics. I'll look that up later. Then you can include projects. If you have personal projects that you've done on infrastructure as code, pipelines, whatever you've done before, you can. I don't mean your current organization's project. Let's say you are working on an organization and you now say, okay, because I did this inside this organization, let me go and post it on my own GitHub. That is intellectual property thefts, and there are laws guiding that, which eventually is going to lead to illegal squabble and eventually probably imprisonment. So you don't share your company data. There's a data protection policy. So what I'm saying is your personal work, your personal project outside company work. You get that is why it is good to have the technical depth, not just credentials, such that even if you are not showing or you don't have a repo to show what you've done, but you can in the technical or in the technical test, you can perform and show what you are. So because a lot of people find themselves stuck within organizations, they keep on putting in the work, working literally 18 hours a day and they may not have time to do personal projects because they're already doing real-time projects. I mean, there's no difference. I mean, what they are doing is even more valuable because it's for a valid business context, what is customers are currently using, but they don't have that on their personal GitHub repo or whatever. And they cannot copy that there because they are working under the employment of a company that invariably owns that property, invariably owns that code or that action. Because if you're working under an employer, what you do under that employer for the particular job will belong to that employer. So yeah, such kind of persons would always perform well or would always show their performance in the technical interview. So in a test basically, because like I said, there are so many DevOps engineers I know that they have portfolios on GitHub. There are some they don't have any portfolio, but they are very good because I've worked with them. So it depends on what you want to be or your role. But if you have this, it's a good to have. So you can always take out little time to just develop one external profile so that you can build on it anytime you are free. Then interview preparation. Key questions. So they will always ask you, I mean, most DevOps interview will always ask, what's the CI/CD pipeline? Is it just can you automate code and delivery? Is it just that? The CI/CD pipeline is more than that. Talk about CI/CD pipeline, you're talking about the whole flow from code commits, the control of releasing changes to different environments, right from code commit down to production environments. Then you talk about the components of a CI/CD pipeline, adhering to security. I mean, we know that security is shifting left. That is, we have to proactively code securely. There's a concept called secure coding. I mean, if you have software engineering experience, where you talk about the OWASP principles of API security and the likes. So there's a concept called security coding, and I mean, which developers have to adhere to, even yourselves and you have to adhere to. So some developers or some people may not adhere to that. That is where integrations and CI/CD pipelines come in to check and get. It's like a double check. A developer A cannot tell me that, okay, my code is securely done, so no need to test vulnerabilities on your code and get using a particular vulnerability tool, like let's say Veracode or Sonar security. Yeah, you cannot come and tell me that because that process or the process of security scanning is directly integrated into the pipeline. So therefore, once it gets to that event, it runs security scan against your build artifacts and gives you the script. It fails, the pipeline fails. So CI/CD pipeline is more like the control of the whole change management process, which starts from code commits down to production. I mean, typically starts from when customers request for features. So, from the development side now, let's leave the operations guys out. It starts from code commits down to production. That's a CI/CD pipeline. An efficient CI/CD pipeline covers that. And an efficient CI/CD pipeline must be able to, must also have must have visibility with regards to execution time. That is how you track performance. That's how you track how well you are performing when it comes to deployment lead times, how often you release changes. So you have to also find a way to implement. So I mean, CI/CD pipeline is a robust process. So subsequently when we get there, or when the technical aspect come and when you get to the technical aspect of CI/CD pipelines, you would see more, we'll talk more on that. How does infrastructure as code work? This is the kind of thing they will ask you. How do you use Terraform to automate DNS or to control DNS management? How do you use Terraform for that? You now have to explain that you have to use a Terraform provider that works with AWS, an AWS Terraform provider. You need to provision an S3 bucket that will store the state files or that will store the states of your RAT53 or your DNS objects or your domains that will store your domains. Because infrastructure as code is more like I have 100 DNS, I have 100 domains on my AWS RAT53. Now I want to add a domain to 100. So two things are going to happen when I'm trying to add that domain using Terraform, on AWS. First of all, Terraform state needs to check for how many domains are there. If the domain I'm trying to add does not already exist, if it already exists, it's going to throw an error or an exception. If it does not exist, that means it has to add, it has to update. Two actions. How does it know what is already there, and how does it know, okay, I should add now. So that's where we now talk about, RAS-82 storing those particular guys in RAS-82. So I'm using definitely you have to use a TF state, a TF.state file. So you have to use the Terraform state files and how you connect that to RAS-82. So these are the ways you integrate. So you need to understand how infrastructure as code works. That is just AWS context. I can talk of another infrastructure, probably let's say network routing device. How do I control the routing logic within the network routing device using Terraform? Since I've already set up the Terraform modules providers, how do I control it? It's the same logic. Check what is existing, add to it. If it does not already exist, if it does not exist, add to it. If it exists, don't add to it. That's the high level overview. There are times where you have to check for syntax. It doesn't follow a particular format. That all depends on how efficient your Terraform code is. How do you handle deployment failures? First thing, when we have a failed deployment, what do you do? The first thing you do is roll back to the last stable deployment. How do you monitor? How do you set up monitoring? Post-mortem. How do you do post-deployment checks? That's where you have to talk about monitoring stack, ELK, using Prometheus and Grafana for metrics and alerting. So deployment failures and what have you. All these things, you need to understand the basics. So these are just, the questions are pretty much straightforward once you start going deeper into DevOps. You'll find out that the questions are very easy. You have a failed deployment, roll back to the last stable deployment, and troubleshoot why the current deployment failed. Obviously, you are going to have the logs. You check the logs why it failed. If it's a code level issue, the developer goes back. But to ensure that service availability is always 100 or 99.99, the Six Sigma standard for measuring performance, 99.9997 or whatever, to ensure that customers, the uptime of the application is always over 99%. You need to roll back to the last stable version. If not, your customers will be impacted, which is bad rep for your organization. Practice technical concepts. You also have to explain technical concepts, containers versus VMs. That was our last lesson, the last lesson I had with you, containerization. We've not really delved into containerization, but I've explained what containerization is, and I've talked about virtualization in depth. Then you also use star method. So there's this method where they will ask you a question. So let me go back to this. How do you handle deployment failures? If you want to use the star method to answer that question, what do you do? Star is situation, task, action, and result. First thing, the situation was that a deployment was made for a backend application. It was made and users could not, the request to the database started failing. That was the situation. What was your task as a DevOps engineer? Your task as a DevOps engineer was to roll back to the last stable version and ensure service availability. What action did you take? The action you took was to roll back using Git. We are going to talk about Git operations, using Git to the last stable version and ensure the application came up and everything was fine. That was your action, roll back to the last stable version using the replica set. Kubernetes, if it's a Kubernetes application. Then what was the result? Service continuation. The failure was gone. Deployment failure means that there was errors. So it depends on what you use for container orchestration. In Kubernetes, there's something we call rolling updates, whereby if the current deployment is not successful, the old deployment will never leave the cluster till the new one is successful. So that's also a way Kubernetes ensures service availability. However, a failed deployment does not necessarily mean that the application will not come up. So a new application may come up, new set of application come up. And they are still not, old features are impacted. In that case, it's also a failed deployment. What do you do? Roll back to the previous version and troubleshoot the reason why this last guy failed. So that's a way you use situation, task, action, and result. They could also ask you another question. How do you reduce the image size of a Docker image? Then you give them a situation. The situation was we had images of over 2 gig which was now taking more time for them to start, which means that if there is a service outage, it will take more time for customers to start using the service. That means customers will be impacted because it will take longer for their patients to come up. That was the situation. What did you do? You implemented multi-stage, optimized the Docker file by using the double and so that image layers will be reduced. You use a lesser image and base image for your Docker file. So you give to always make it relatable. Don't talk in theory. You talk in theory, they will feel you always sound like someone who doesn't know or someone who is not so technically versed. If you are able to give scenarios, it shows a level of what language I call it? It shows you a level, it shows a level of mastery when you relate it. Everything should be relatable to your own experience. That's why we do a lot of trainings. So that's why we do a lot of implementations in DevOps. Moving on. Using your DevOps brand, how do you build it? I mean, today we are all good with social media. We are all about social media. So social media, we have LinkedIn, we have communities on Reddit, we have communities on Twitter. I'm on Kubernetes, I'm on several DevOps communities on Twitter and Reddit. That's the way you build your DevOps brand. You get to connect with like minds in the industry to know what is currently happening. To probably they have experienced a challenge you are currently experiencing now, or someone is experiencing a challenge you have experienced. You can share, and that's how you grow. Attend meetups. In Lagos, we have local hosts. Yeah, majorly local hosts for DevOps. I have local hosts and other local tech meetup groups. I think they also have young people in tech and the likes. I really don't know of that, but I know of local hosts for DevOps and SRE, that's software engineering. Join communities like I've mentioned. We have Reddit, we have Twitter, we have Discord. Just look out for them. Just be in an environment where you have like minds. On LinkedIn, you can headline your this thing, your profile as aspiring DevOps engineer if you are yet to be a DevOps engineer, you're looking for a DevOps role. Then you can add the skills that you have. Let's say Docker, AWS, Kubernetes, GitOps, and the likes. Then you can share posts. So let's say you've done a little project of yours for yourself on GitHub and likes, and you're able to successfully carry it out. You can just go to LinkedIn and talk about it, and also connect with like minds too, like people who are DevOps engineers in different organizations too. I mean, it's more like selling yourself out there, such that once they see aspiring DevOps engineer and they see what you can do or what you've talked about, I mean, they would reach out to you. I have one of my colleagues who was reached out to because of what he put up on LinkedIn. So that's one of the ways you build your brand. Show what you are doing and show yourself. Don't hide it. I know there are some people that are, what's it called, introverted. They like to be recognized by their skill and not by their words. We're sort of those kind of persons. So that's where those kind of persons, they can go further applying directly to jobs and on career sites. I mean, the market is open for everyone. Then personal branding. You can, I mean, there are a lot of persons that write on Medium today. I know some of us know what Medium is, an article where you write a lot of articles. You can write about yourself. You can also do that on, like, that writing about yourself. Instead of it, if you can't use Medium or probably not a Medium, you can do it on your LinkedIn account. The same thing, show yourself. GitHub, like I said, if you have little pet projects that you do carry out some DevOps activities just to show or just as a as evidence of what you do on the side, fine and good. You should also have it. That's all it's all personal to you. Then another tip, I mean, engage with DevOps thought leaders online. You see people who work in organizations who are probably heads in lead in DevOps engineering and organization, a head DevOps engineering, people who work in organizations that come up with DevOps tools and the likes. You connect with them so that you can share thoughts together. You have questions you ask. That's how you grow in networking. That's networking wise. So it exposes you and you get a lot of exposition and get more knowledge too. So real world DevOps engineering, a day in the life. Personally, I would not want to use what I put on the slide. I mean, this is part of what I do. This is just something to talk on. So let's say in a typical day, a DevOps engineer, you come to work or you log onto your laptop, first thing you do, please mute. Someone is unmuted, please mute. First thing you do, you check out your CI/CD pipelines. If you have a centralized CI/CD pipeline management, like for me, what I do, my team, we have a centralized CI/CD pipeline management such that hundreds of developers use our CI/CD pipeline. They just inherit it. So what we check is we have different infrastructure supporting that CI/CD pipeline. On the morning, I can just get to work. First thing I do before I go to my routers, because I do sprints. We run agile sprints basically. So it's not you come and you sit down. We have sprints, we have tasks for every 2 weeks or every day. Tasks you do daily because you are running sprints. I think I talked briefly on sprints on agile when we initially started. Well, that was on another note. So first, like I said, you can just say to, okay, check on the infrastructure supporting your pipeline, see if pipelines are failing, because when pipelines are failing, it means that your organization or your team will be impacted. They would have changes that will be delayed. Customers will be calling, and I mean, it's negatively impacting. So as high performance organization, the goal is to reduce deployment lead time to less than 24 hours. And you can't achieve that if you have pipelines failing on a Monday morning, on a Tuesday morning, or on any day. So reliability is a very big deal in DevOps. That is why you check. Then you have check monitoring dashboards to see, let's say, your logging infrastructure. What components is it logging fine? Is your Kibana, are you seeing the volume of logs you should see? Are you seeing real-time logs? Prometheus, Grafana, are you seeing metrics that you're supposed to see now? Because with metrics and logs, you can get visibility and get quicker response. I mean, SROs use these tools a lot for site reliability engineering, reliability, where they get to quickly discover and proactively avert any upcoming disaster to a particular service that is available to customers nationally or globally. So when you review all this, or you check all this, that's like a daily activity. Then you review CI/CD pipeline status, like I said, check what is going on. Then probably you have a project at hand, write IAC or write an infrastructure as code, logic, and you just go ahead to do that. I mean, I've done that, and I'm going to do something similar this Monday too. So that's one thing. Troubleshoot. I mean, there's always issues. People, DevOps engineers, software engineers, quality assurance engineers, and even site reliability engineers and operations guys would always need the DevOps to help troubleshoot. So that is a daily thing. Troubleshooting is like a daily thing.